All right, it's 8:15. And I'd like to call the Whatcom PUD #1 regularly scheduled meeting to order. The first item on the agenda, which I just closed, okay, is of course the approval of the agenda. So I think just for everybody's help here, we've made a couple of last minute
Commissioner?
changes. Yeah.
Pledge of Allegiance.
Commissioner, we skipped over the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, so thank you for that, Michael. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I've always recited the pre-Eisenhower version of the pledge. Forgive me. So the approval of the agenda is next. So we've had a few late modifications to the agenda. And the first thing is under new business to add a temporary work area easement agreement, 6A. Another change is we've added an executive session after public comment. And let's see. Is that everything, Chris?
I think so, Commissioner. I'm just looking at it and there doesn't appear to be anything else.
Okay, great.
Unless one of the other commissioners has something to add.
No. So if there,
I just note that there's no, for the public, there's no action anticipated after that executive session, and we'll estimate the time before we start.
Great. Thank you, John. Is there any other modification to the agenda?
No.
Great. So with that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll
There's a motion.
second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Great. Let's move on to the consent agenda, which is the approval of the minutes and the claims for February 28th. And the minutes of our last meeting, February 14th. Any discussion? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
And I'll
Any
second.
further? Okay, as a motion a second, any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes as well. So let's move on to our first public comment. We have two of these, one at the beginning and one at the end of the meeting. Is there anybody who'd like to comment? Please, if you're on Zoom, please signify by raising your hand. Or of course, if you're in the room, please feel free to speak up. Let's go to the people in the room first. Rick, are you gonna make a comment, please?
No comment.
He
Oh,
says
come
no
on, say-
comment.
Say something, Rick. No comment. Okay, great. Anybody online through Zoom? I don't see any hands raised. Am I right?
It looks clear, Commissioner.
Great. Oh, then I'll go ahead and close the first public comment period. Let's move on to old business. And is Andrew able to participate via Zoom or anyway, Chris, take the ball.
Okay, so Andrew is available on Zoom. Let me just give you a quick update. We did receive notification that there was a challenge to one of our grant applications. And without consulting us, the broadband office deemed it was an invalid objection, so an invalid challenge. And so that was declined. One of the, in fact, the grant that the port submitted has a challenge, a partial challenge that has been accepted as a valid partial challenge. And we're not sure exactly what what process Gina's going to have to go through. It's from Comcast and it's up in the Sumas area, right outside of between Sumas and Linden. So we're not exactly sure what steps we're going to have to go through to help cure that challenge, but or if it's in fact valid, we're just not sure at this point. And that is my only update for broadband for this week. Andrew?
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We got you.
Okay, perfect. Yep. So that's the big news. Thanks, Chris, for kicking that off for us. I'll just touch on the digital equity meeting that was held last Thursday. Port of Bellingham and Whatcom PUD invited a number of stakeholders to meet for the purpose of building a digital equity plan. Essentially, the state broadband office has partnered with WSU Extension they're going county by county, developing countywide digital equity plans. And then that will roll up into a larger statewide digital equity plan that the state will submit for funding, which will be part of the big BEAD, what's called the BEAD funding, which is the big kahuna of dollars that are coming down for broadband infrastructure. So aside from the infrastructure, we also have to create a statewide digital equity plan. So they're going county by county, helping us put together these work plans. And so WSU has put together this multi-page worksheet for we can go stakeholder by stakeholder and fills out, what entity works with what jurisdiction or what covered populations in the community, basically trying to figure out what digital equity assets or services are out there in the community. So during the meeting, we discussed what all that means. Representative from WSU came and gave a great presentation. And this next steps is Gina will send out to each stakeholder group the specific worksheet that will need to be filled out. And then we'll meet and start putting together that plan. There'll also be some dollars coming down that will be available for counties that we could hire a consultant to help put together the final plan for our county if need be. So more to come on that front. But it was a great meeting and lots of folks did come. There were superintendents from the schools and ISPs were there. So many others. So it was a good turnout. So we'll keep you posted as we move through that digital equity workbook. So that's my update. Back to you, Chris.
Okay, and I just want to add on two things. One, some people were there from the library districts. I mean, there were a lot of people at that meeting. And then the other thing is just to note, kind of kudos to Gina and Andrew. Much of what's going to be required in the digital equity plan actually has been put into our various grant applications, much if not all. So Gina and Andrew developed something that looked like what the state's requiring as a digital equity plan in their analysis of our community and how we were serving it. So hats off to them. They've already done an incredible amount of this work. And I don't have anything further to add for an update on broadband. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to spawn some discussion, but Commissioner Grant, Commissioner Arnett?
Oh, so I just, there was a lot of discussion about the broadband action team. And all the forms at the WPUDA meetings, they showed us this 18 worksheet plan that we need to fill out to complete our broadband action team to the specifications of the Washington State Broadband Office. So my understanding is that you and Gene are, so is that connected to this digital equity work? The acronym soup is kind of getting confusing to me. I just knew that after the WPUDA meetings that finalizing our BAT seemed important to get the BEAD dollars. So I'm assuming that everybody is on it, but just wanted to touch base about that because it was such a big emphasis of discussion at the WPUDA meetings.
Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, so essentially we're a step ahead of that in a way because we have the steering committee, which is essentially has been acting as the county's BAT team, but we have decided to meet with the larger stakeholder group, which will basically become the BAT, so to speak. It's not necessary to create a structured, formalized broadband action team. We can keep continuing as the steering committee to be the lead bat for, if you will, for the county, but we'll continue to engage through this digital equity development by engaging with the stakeholders like we did last Thursday. And there'll be an updated meeting in March as we develop through this. There's a number of details that WSU are still working through. For example, the dollars that are coming down to help support this work. And that hasn't been released yet. They also have a June 6th deadline. So there's some things that the program is still developing, and we're kind of just plugging along with the information that we have today. But to your question about the BAT, I hope that answered that. We're engaging, and we're good on the broadband action team front. We can check that box.
Okay.
And just to confirm an answer to Commissioner Grant's question, all the checklists and the forms have been filled out.
They're in the process of filling that stuff out. That's what's been distributed by Gina to all of these stakeholder groups. It's the exact set of documents that WPUDA is talking about.
It
Good.
looked like a lot of work to fill all those out.
If you were to fill them all out yourself, it's a heck of a lot of work. But Andrew and Gina, rightly, I think they're dividing it up because each worksheet that's in there is targeted at one particular audience. And so getting the worksheet out to each of these audiences is not that big a deal for them to fill it out and get it back to us. And then it's just compiling all that. And I still don't think that the state has a mechanism for putting all of these county plans into a single larger plan. And that's what they're still working on. I think that's why they hired WSU, was trying to figure out how to do that.
Okay, great. Well, I just wanted to follow up on that and make sure we're in a good position to seek those BEAD dollars whenever they're available.
Commissioner Arnett?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, so I'd like to raise first topic of regarding digital equity. One of the things that I'd like to first do is compliment our team, Gina, Andrew, to that and the work they're doing to, I guess, be proactive on top of it. I'm thinking ahead, and so much of what the digital equity funding and the purposes behind the digital equity funding requires actions by more than the PUD and the port, because they go much beyond providing access for people in rural areas. It deals a lot with actually providing education, sometimes assistance, other kinds of assistance to help people actually utilize the infrastructure that might even be present near them. And for those reasons, a significant degree might fall outside the scope of the PUD and the port. It might. I mean, as a commission, we have to define what the scope is. So I'm not trying to jump the gun at all, but it might. And certainly the analysis of things that have to do with economic development or people's economic position, it requires the involvement of many other people. So I'm not at all concerned about what we've done, but concerned about where we go and trying to get other people engaged at the level we're engaged. And so I want to identify other leaders in the community, perhaps, as Chris, I think you've suggested, at the libraries, but also people at the city and perhaps other places to actually carry the weight of managing a digital equity program. And I just want to make sure we're thinking about that and identifying these other staff people in the community, in other local governments, to be able to administer a program that's providing education and assistance, or decide that we're going to, or we're going to assume a greater role than we currently are. So that's the topic I want to discuss and figure out how do we go about actually, at the end of the day, when we have funding for digital equity, we're going to have to do some assistance, real assistance. So that's a topic I'm really raising, and I want to find out what the other commissioners think about that subject. And as well you, Chris.
Well, I just want to point out that our studies have been focused on areas of the county where we believe we can get grant funding to construct infrastructure. So it's typically on underserved and unserved parts of the county from the FCC perspective. The overall digital equity plan is going to include areas that are technically fully served, even though there may be pockets or individual customers that are not served. So it's going to surface that. Now, whether or not the ISPs are either willing or able to access any additional funds to build out infrastructure inside a served area is, we can kind of poke at them and point out that this needs to be done, but ultimately it'll be up to them to do it. Eventually, after we've got all of the county areas served, however that happens, then, it'll be really looking at this kind of infill issue and who is and is not served or well served inside of these already served areas. So this digital equity plan should help surface that and, help focus on the folks that are involved. I do believe that Gina invited the small cities partnership members. I recall there's somebody from the city of Bellingham on the call, but I don't recall seeing Andrew. Sorry about that. But I don't recall exactly who it was. So there was an awful lot of people who were invited to this meeting. Not all of them showed, but the intent was to be really inclusive and try and get at all the areas of the county, not just the unserved and underserved areas. I hope that helps.
Well, and it really makes me, and I realize that, why is the PUD working on broadband is because our commission made it a prior policy priority. And the leaders of the city and the county are deferring to the PUD and the port as far as broadband activity in our community. So if we want to get other folks involved, we have to create we as commissioners, Jamie and Christine and I have to communicate with the other electeds in the community to see if they want to make a digital equity a policy initiative, because it's not something that the PUD can carry on our own. So that's kind of why I'm raising this issue.
Atul, I would sort of like to see digital equity defined for us, though, just because an area is now served doesn't necessarily mean that the customer is served. There's affordability issues for some families as well. In digital equity, one of the things, because I work in youth mental health, one of the things the U.S. Surgeon General put out an advisory in December of 2021 for youth mental health. And one of the things that was discovered is that youth living in rural areas suffered disproportionately poor outcomes for mental health during the pandemic because they didn't have access to internet. So when we talk about digital equity, are we talking about those issues also? Or are we just talking about, creating an opportunity for access? Or are we talking about affordability? How deep are we going to go for equity and inclusion? And Atul just went away.
Oh, Atul, are you still there? Can you hear us?
I think he just turned off his camera for a second.
So I go on, I suspend the video on occasion because my connection gets shot.
Okay. I think you make a great point, Commissioner Arnett. I think, there is some really interesting work already happening in the county on digital equity. And I was not able to attend the kickoff for this, but does everyone know about the digital equity bus that Evergreen Goodwill started? I'll send a link to Chris and he can forward it. But it's basically like a mobile classroom space. And so I think Goodwill has been doing some really interesting work on digital equity. And I know Debbie All from the Mount Baker Foundation has also been very involved in that as well. So I think it'd be really good to, and Andrew, you maybe already know about all of this, but to really understand what efforts are already underway, and understand where we can support and how we best can support. Andrew, is that something that as you get a little further in your process, you might be able to give us an overview of some of the efforts already underway, since it seems like you're going to be exploring that with the work that you're doing currently?
Yes, absolutely. Some, not all of what you're talking about was included in our recent broadband feasibility study. And then continuing down the path here in terms of the timeline, what we'll have here is not only we'll hope to have identified all of these opportunities, like the bus that you just talked about from Goodwill, and there's probably many others that we don't even know about. And the goal is to then not only document that, but also put together what's called a digital equity asset map, so that folks can go and see all of those different opportunities that are available. And I don't think that exists today. So that's part of the goal here. So yeah, definitely do a more formal update as we move through this process.
And I just want to point out, Debbie All has reached out to us many, many times. I've talked to her, I don't know, a dozen times since I've been here. And Gina invited me to the kickoff that Goodwill Industries held for that digital equity bus, I think back in November or something.
Mm-hmm.
And she's heavily involved with Goodwill. So, you know, she's kind of our official broadband leadership team member that is directly connected to Goodwill, and among other things. I mean, she's tightly connected in the community, which is a great thing. And she's a great asset to have on our team.
Okay, just to summarize this subject, is there any more discussion? I just want to hear from the other commissioners about whether you feel like the level of engagement and awareness of county and city council members is sufficient, and are they aware of our digital equity efforts? And do we need to do any outreach in that department, or do you think that things are happening organically in the way that they should?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I can't gauge the level of awareness of other, elected officials at the county or city level. I would say that in my conversations, primarily with Councilmember Galloway, we have been focused on getting infrastructure built and less on the digital equity side of things. And of course, there are still significant challenges and a lot of work to be done on the infrastructure side, and so it has not been a huge focus of mine, just because overcoming all of these barriers with RDOF and dig once and grants and coordination with the port has taken up plenty of all of our time. So I think getting an update, Andrew, like you just said, would be really helpful. And I think that inviting in, council members that are that could be interested, I know Councilmember Galloway has joined several of our meetings when we've done updates like this. And if there's others on the council that care about this issue, then I think, we should let them know about it.
Yeah, and again, the reason I was bringing this up is, but I just see that I'm just trying to look ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And I see the next tranche of substantial funding to be less about RDOF and to be more about digital equity.
Yeah.
And I just don't want our community to miss the boat. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing so much good work. I mean, at the PUD and port to set up for a successful next phase that addresses digital equity. It would be a shame if it fell flat because of lack of awareness and engagement of our colleagues at the city and the county. That's all I'm that's why I'm raising the issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Atul, I just want to reiterate and maybe sort of clear. So in my opinion, just having infrastructure built out does not equate equity. So if you really want to talk about equity, you have to remove all barriers for a person to become, linked to the online world. So, pieces of that are affordability, pieces of that are equipment. When you talk about digital equity, I'll just push back again, like we need to define what that means to us before we even have meaningful conversations about what we're doing for digital equity. Infrastructure doesn't equal equity.
Right, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I guess we should get a clarification. I think that's probably where Andrew's definition of digital equity is at present, but Andrew, can you address that?
The WSU workbook defines digital equity, and we could send that out to the team if that would be helpful.
And it's very much in line with what Commissioner Arnett said, right, Andrew?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think we're all on board with this idea of what digital equity really means. The question is, when it comes time to close that gap, Commissioner Arnett, who works on closing that gap? Is that purely a PUD and port responsibility? Or is it a responsibility that we have to engage cities and the county in? And I'm arguing the latter, but I'm very open to the discussion.
Wouldn't our service agreements have to include equitable language?
Yeah, but our service agreements are going to be providing the infrastructure for other ISPs. So the PUD is at least not at present talking about retail service. So, there'll be a limited number of rural customers, I suppose, where we could engage with the ISP on digital equity issues. But of course, digital equity is both a rural and an urban subject. Go ahead, good, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone of the process that we're going through here. So we have the ability to get dollars from the federal government through the state to put in infrastructure. And we're putting in infrastructure to places that have no infrastructure today, essentially. So it's on or off. And, we've tried to select areas that also address digital equity. The process is, once we're awarded a grant, we will turn around and begin negotiating IRUs with the ISPs. Those IRUs will come back to this commission for approval. So, I would say, in a sense, keep in mind, we're an infrastructure oriented business right now, that we want third-party funding for that infrastructure, and that how that infrastructure will be used will have year 3 input on it right from the get-go. So, the IRUs that have been negotiated by the port are not necessarily the same ones that we're going to attempt to negotiate, and you guys will get to see the product of that and approve the product of that.
Okay. And of course, if there's a particularly disadvantaged individual that's now going to be served on the PUD system, the infrastructure that PUD builds, are we planning to provide digital equity services, education, outreach, and subsidy if needed for those customers? Or is that going to be a responsibility of the ISP?
Well, number one, it'll be the responsibility of the ISP. The language that Andrew and I have talked about includes guaranteeing the accessibility of a low-cost, high-speed internet connection for low-income people. It also includes a cap on the price of high-cost, high-speed internet that is something that we think is reasonable. And that, again, will be a negotiated process. So there's a lot of things that are going to go into this. We're going to make sausage with the ISP, and there's probably going to be certain features you guys want to see come out of that negotiation to have an acceptable conclusion to the negotiation, and we'll be bringing that back to you. I would suggest that you allow staff to do that negotiation and work with John Sitkin to make sure it's all legal, and just allow us to do that, and we'll get some broad guidance from you going into it. We're not there yet. We haven't been awarded a grant.
Yeah, and Chris, we have significant time to talk more about this subject, just liquidity, I just wanted to begin that conversation, recognizing the fact that there's going to be likely many participants in the subject, and just recognizing that and having us thinking about that. And maybe at some point, a presentation, next opportunity there is to give and of course, that has to be based on a request from the councils. I'm sure you guys would be open to make presentations on the subject of digital equity to the various other local governments.
Yes, I have
So
no problem doing that, especially at the
As
small
well.
cities. We can do that. Catch a lot of them that way. And in fact, Seth Fleetwood was at the last small cities meeting. So you don't
Great.
just get that narrow group, you get others.
Great. And
So I just would want to point out on the bookend. So again, I always look for the extreme cases. The one extreme case is that we get all 3 of our grants awarded. If that's the case, we'll have 3 separate ISPs and probably 3 separate IRUs that we negotiate. So I would expect that those would have slightly different looking outcomes just because you're dealing with 3 different sets of, for lack of a better word, attorneys. And, each one of those groups is going to have their own ask on the thing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
John's smiling.
and to the commission for the discussion on this subject. There's not any specific outcomes. I'm just glad we had a chance to discuss it. The other item I wanted to raise was the IRUs. I had a conversation with 2 county council members, and both of them were wondering what the PUD's opinion was on IRUs, and when the presentation was made for EDI funding. Apparently one of the county council members raised the issue of retained public ownership, and they were looking for support from the PUD on our opinion on the subject. And of course, I think probably because we weren't going to be calling out our partners in a funding presentation, we kept quiet. But I just wanted to share with the commission and you, Chris, that there's folks at the county who would prefer the same approach that the commission adopted, which is for the public to retain ownership of the infrastructure. So I'm bringing
I
that
just
up.
want to point out to, well, I just want to point out to the commission that the enabling statutes that underlie the port are different than the ones that underlie the PUDs. So our stance on public ownership of assets is different than the ports by law. And, of course, our IRUs will comply with those differences in law. And I look to John to help us do that. It's not good or bad when you look at the difference between what we negotiate and what the port negotiates. It's just different. Their underlying statutes are different. And so their outcomes are by definition going to be a little bit different than ours. And that's okay. Ours are really simple. If we want to get rid of utility assets, we have to have a vote of the people of the county in order to do it. So our IRUs probably will not incorporate any transfer of assets out of the public sphere, just because it would require a vote in order to accomplish it. And that's just a fundamental difference. The port's underlying statutes allow them to liquidate assets when it's desirable to do so. And so that was a negotiating piece in their IRUs. Again, let us get the grant. Let us, come back to you and say, here's the IRU we'd like to attempt to negotiate. Let us negotiate it, and then let us bring back to you the results of that, and you can tell us whether it's acceptable or not.
Right. And I'm not referring to that process at all, or to make any changes to that process. What I'm referring to is as the overseer of the EDI program, the county council does have a right to express, as they have in the past, as much to my chagrin, how the EDI money is spent. They have a say. County council members have a say. And so what I'm just sharing with the commission and you, Chris, is that they seem to prefer, at least a couple of the county council members seem to prefer retained public ownership. And, that doesn't apply to us. It does apply to our partners. Sorry, Commissioner Grant.
Oh, I think the port has received that message loud and clear. And it's just, Chris, you kind of have more of a perspective on this, but they they feel like they did the best they could negotiating their IRU. And so I think it's a reason why
Yeah.
I'm glad that we are both organizations are applying for grants, because we're able to take a different approach and have demonstrate different strategies for how we're going to deploy in these funds.
I would also add to this that we've been bystanders and really observed the hoops the county has made Gina jump through. And where she has to take 5, 6, 7 bites at the apple just to get a yes from them. And you will note on our 3 grants, we do not require the use of any county matching funds beyond the ones that were dedicated by Senator or then Congresswoman Shoemake. So that's and those were required to be matching funds for, I believe, telecom efforts in Point Roberts. They are very, very specific, so that unless the county wanted to spend the money on that, they couldn't spend it at all. So we were asking for those funds for the Point Roberts. For the other 2 applications we put in, we are not seeking county matching funds. We had other sources of matching funds identified. So I think we're not going to have to go through what Gina went through, where she had to go back repeatedly and ask for the same funds over and over again. And, we're just not, where it's desirable to have the county as a funding partner, we will pursue that. Where it's possible that we can avoid that, we probably will.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this as well. It was mostly a point of information to share with the commission. Any more discussion on broadband?
I just have 2 really quick things. Chris, I know you're working hard getting the ILA completed with Whatcom County so that Andrew can help support with the GIS work, which will help with kind of notification in terms of when there's road construction and kind of supporting Councilmember Galloway's vision for Dig Once. So we talked about that yesterday, but I just wanted to kind of flag that for the other commissioners that's been in process for a little while. And I really hope that we can get that finalized at our next commission meeting. And also just that Chris and Andrew and I had an initial conversation with the Cantwell, Murray, Larson staff, and I think it went well. I think they understand the problem and know that this RDOF issue is a problem in a lot of different communities. And so, they have promised to give us some feedback in terms of some possible solutions. So I'd say more on that later when we hear back from them. But I did just want to say that it was a good initial meeting, and I forwarded our letter to Kitsap, and it seems like they may also be reaching out to the same staff. So just underscoring the fact that this is a statewide, actually, I think nationwide issue with the RDOF program. So I'm glad we're being the squeaky wheel, and we'll see if anything happens. So other than that, just fingers crossed that we hear back from the Washington State Broadband Office before too long.
Right.
So Commissioner Dashmani?
Yeah.
We have 2 ILAs that are in flight with regards to broadband with the county. We've received back a marked up version of the ILA that gets them on our broadband steering committee along with us and Port. And I have not forwarded that to council yet. That will be something I do today. We got it back sometime yesterday. We haven't received a marked up version yet of the ILA that allows us to help the county in terms of supplying technical aid and assistance. So we're looking for that. And yes, as soon as we get those back, get them in shape, because both us and the port have to agree with the change on the leadership team. And it looks like what they've agreed to is have one person from their staff, either Tyler or their, what's the gal's title? Andrew, do you remember?
Kayla.
Yeah, it was Kayla, but
she's the deputy administrator or
It was something different. It was like an infrastructure project management or something. But anyway, Kayla, either Tyler or Kayla be the member on the committee. So I think that would be very helpful.
Can I just make a suggestion moving forward when we speak about technical things, just to keep our language accessible to the public? We just, speaking of acronym soup, we've just used a lot of acronyms that most people don't. It's not part of their regular vocabulary, right? So IRU, ILA, GIS, EDI, there's just been a lot of that. So let's just be conscious of that moving forward.
Thank you, Jamie. That's a very important point. And we have, we go back and forth to being really good about this and then falling back into the same habits. So thanks for the reminder. Any further discussion on broadband? Okay, great. Let's move on to the second topic, which is water.
So we added this topic.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, no, I was just going to introduce you, John, and just say that we've added this topic so that John has a standing place, or staff has a standing place where we can update you on adjudication now that a lot of our efforts are out from behind closed doors in the public domain. So John, take it away.
Certainly. Likely a brief update. We're in the middle of the legislative session, House Bill 1792, that we've helped facilitate the crafting of amongst the various key larger interested parties in the basin. That has gone through the House Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee with the majority favorable unanimous vote. It has also been placed onto rules for the second reading. That occurred, I think, last week, and my understanding is that that'll be moving forward out of rules, but I don't have any clear update. You can go to the state legislative website. It has a very positive bill analysis and bill report. Ecology indicated no fiscal impact to ecology, which is a key message to say that really ecology has no objection. Their testimony at the hearing was other, meaning they have no objection to the bill, as did the tribes. And so we are hopeful this will go through. HB 1792 is a bill for the public to understand that provides some clarity as to some timing that was sought by the parties, both the timing to file a claim, which is the initial action a respondent interested party in a water right would have, is to file their claim to water right, and then additional 3 years to file the evidence in support of a claim. That time frame was also sought by the tribes and all the parties, the agricultural community and others. So ecology is clearly starting the adjudication this fall. The funding's in the budget. There's no indication the funding won't occur. Everybody involved in this process of drafting the legislation has supported that in the sense of not asking for any diversion of funds or change in direction to ecology. So we expect the adjudication to commence this fall. Ecology is preparing for that. And so that's where that is at. We'll probably expect more in the next few weeks, but nothing in the short term until the Senate goes through the Senate hearing process. The budget proviso is working its way quietly through the processes. It has a proviso for a direction to ecology of how to expend some of its fund. This is a proviso that would not take away money from the adjudication, either for the courts or for ecology, but supplemental funds, use of funds directed towards solution studies and other studies in the basin as contemplated by the regional water supply plan that's drafting the implementation strategy and working through the county and the watershed management board processes or other supply directions. Don't have an update on that, but I think that is being worked into the ecology budget as a proviso by our local representatives. So that is really all I have on the adjudication front at this time.
Thank you, John. Further discussion, commissioners?
Nothing for me.
Thanks for the update, John.
Great. Well, thanks for the update. We're just waiting to hear back. As far as the public, it's important to understand that, in general, we haven't been discussing the PUD's efforts regarding adjudication. And for the obvious reason, it's sensitive and it involves lots of potential legal issues. And we as a commission have had 2 educational sessions, water workshops. We had a special meeting, second special meeting on the subject of water to educate the commission on the practical realities of water for the PUD. And also we had a water workshop number 1, which was focused on understanding water law and a little bit of the physics of water, how it enters our system. So, commission's available and open to talk to people in the community. And, we'll be talking more about issues around water as time goes on. Thank you.
I just clarified, just those 2 work sessions were open to the public and are.
And we're recorded, right? Great. If that's all for old business, let's move on.
On new business, we have a temporary easement, and Brian Walters is here to talk about it with the City of Ferndale.
Thank you, Chris.
Morning, Commissioners. The City of Ferndale and the Corps of Engineers have been in planning mode for some time now regarding a project to repair the Nooksack River levee at a point just upstream from our Water Plant 1 intake. That levee was damaged in previous floods, and they want to do that repair to, so the situation doesn't get worse and they could potentially face a breach or something. But the reason we brought this matter to you today is that the city, in fact, they have a deadline tomorrow to secure federal funding for the project. They need to have a construction package put together to present. And here again, it's an effort of the Corps and the city. One piece of that construction package is to identify an area where they can lay down equipment and materials to be used in the repair of the levee. We have property right across the street from that repair point, and it's a secured property in that we have a fence around it. So the city approached us about a temporary, work area easement. And we have been negotiating that easement over the past couple of weeks, gone through 3 versions. John Sitkin has reviewed and provided comment. And we're at a point now, the easement that we sent out late yesterday meets the PUD's needs in terms of risk. I mean, one of the major concerns that we had was whether or not the activities involved with that laydown area would interfere with our use of the property and operation of Plant 1 and the construction of the new substation. I think we're satisfied from a staff level that those concerns have been addressed, and we do support this easement. It has a benefit to us in that repair of that levee needs to take place before we can proceed with our project, the phase 1, the utilidor project for the rebuild of Plant 1. So we're supportive. Our concerns have been addressed, and we would ask for approval of that easement. I also might mention, I see that Paul Knippel from the City of Ferndale is online today, and I don't know if he wants, Paul, if you've got any comments you want to make, please raise your hand and we'll get you online.
Thank you. I think you've done an excellent job of expressing the need and the negotiations that have taken place. This was damaged during the November 2021 flood. That's temporary repair. The riprap that you see across the road there has been a temporary replacement. And this has certainly been a long time coming, but a very short window. So I really appreciate the PUD's efforts in expediting the easement negotiation. look forward to making, this will be a $500,000 repair, close to 600,000 after design work on the part of the Corps with a $117,000 contribution by the city. Look forward to making sure that levee's secure as soon as possible. They'll bring that levee back up to the 100-year flood protection level. So thank you once again for your efforts and your quick response on that. Truly appreciated on the part of the city, and a great place for the city and the PUD can work together for common good there. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Brian. It's good to hear from the city of Ferndale and appreciate our great working relationship. On a personal note, Paul, I'm still waiting for that shoulder to be paved so I can ride my bike all the way on the shoulder from my house to the PUD on Axton Road.
Noted.
Commissioners,
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Oh, yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the temporary work area easement for the city of Ferndale.
I'll
there's a
second.
motion, there's a motion and a second. No further discussion? Let's move on to a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 One additional comment on the subject, to Brian, I assume that we're, stuff happens, right? During any construction project. So I assume that we're prepared for quick response if something happens that affects our intake, for example, in the process of constructing this levee. And we're looking at, things, potential response to something that might not go right. So.
Yes, Commissioner, and part of the provision within that easement is coordination among the parties, the PUD, the city, and the Corps, to try to ensure nothing, a negative impact is not going to occur, or if we'll anticipate what to do if it does. So I think we're in good shape.
Thank you. Okay, is there anything else under new business? I didn't see it on the agenda, just double checking, Chris.
Well, Commissioner Deshmani, I guess I'm confused. Did you vote on that? I didn't. He did. Okay. I have nothing
thought
else
I did, yes,
on.
yeah, yes, yeah. We had 3 ayes.
Okay.
Did we not?
Excellent.
Did we not call a vote? And can you remind me? Did we actually?
We did.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
My apologies.
No, it doesn't hurt to ask. Let's move on then, Chris, to the general manager's report.
Just a couple of quick things. Next commission meeting, I will be out of town and Brian will be covering for me. So we'll make sure everything is lined up and taken care of before that. So it shouldn't be any kind of a problem. The second thing is the value of our relationship with PUD was once again demonstrated to me personally this week or late last week. We had a really incendiary article from the Seattle Times. I forwarded it out to everybody, and working very quickly with PUD, we were able to verify that, in fact, the Times author pretty much got it wrong. And PUD was very much on top of the bill and the content of it and what our stance ought to be. And it was really just delightful to get that kind of rapid response from PUD for something that it wasn't something they even were officially tracking at that point. They just knew all about it and had been following the issue. So it was really gratifying to see that we could get that service from PUD so quickly. And unless there are other questions for me, that's my report.
Well, thank you, Chris. And also thank you for being responsive. I mean, if you don't ask, you don't know. The investigation was certainly a potential one in the legislative session where things can go wrong real quick. So I'm glad that you were looking at it seriously very quickly. So next, any more on general manager's report?
I just had a question, Chris. Were you able to join the Climate Impacts Advisory Council or Committee on February 16th?
Commissioner, I was,
Okay.
and there was a long discussion about the proposed BP project, and Ray Kamada had put together kind of an economic analysis, and I was able to take a look at what he had done and verify it was at least in the ballpark of what you'd expect to see for a very large solar plant. And he's going to be working with BP to see if they can push that up their corporate ladder and get it approved. So thank you for the heads up. I really appreciate it. And I think I was able to add to their meeting, and I'm going to be in as many of those as I can in the future. They're open to the public. I'm not going to be a member of the task force, but just an interested third party who's there.
Okay, great. Thank you for attending that.
My pleasure.
It's great to see those BP's project ideas moving forward. They've been talking about that now for several years, so it's great to see that things are starting to seem more and more real on that front.
Well, I've got to be clear. This was Ray Kamada that was pushing the project, not BP. BP had a representative there, and their input was, this sounds like a good idea. We have to run it up the flagpole. So no idea yet. But that being said, BP had a public statement that they were going to do, and don't quote me, I don't remember the number, but it was huge. It was like $5 or $10 billion in these types of projects worldwide. So the local BP guys said, this fits with what we're trying to do as a corporation. Let me see if I can get it funded through the budgeting process. So we'll hear back on that probably later this year and see where we go.
Yeah, and I think I've already reported to the commission last year on more than one occasion. Staff from BP were communicated, and I think Chris, you've also reported on their interest in exploration of hydrogen-related projects, and of course they want renewable supply for that. And I think we've already covered that in prior commission meetings, and continue to be glad to hear that these kind of conversations can occur. There was a time when ideas like this hit a wall. So there's a lot of receptivity for these kinds of ideas, and that in itself is a positive step forward, in my opinion. So
one more quick question, Chris. When will we be getting an update on a PUD owned renewable energy project? Are we getting close to having an RFP going out?
We are. In fact, Brian could talk about this, but I've talked to Kurt a number of times about it, and he's working with a couple of vendors, and he's got preliminary numbers. And it's one of those things. We'll bring it back to you guys and say, here's what we think. You want us to let the RFP, and then assuming we get a proposal back that's acceptable, we would bring a contract to you.
So what's the timeline for that then?
We'd probably be able to get the RFP out in sometime in March or early April and get a contract back to you guys before May 1. So sometime in the next couple of months. Right now, what Kurt's working on is trying to scope what the ideal size of the project is. We took a look at a relatively larger project, and the economics of it weren't as good as a relatively smaller project. And so it's, what's the sweet spot for us?
Thank you.
okay, any more under the general manager's report? Okay, let's move on to the operations.
That's it for me.
report. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah,
Let's
I
move
don't
on
have
to-
anything. Sorry, Commissioner.
No, go ahead.
For the operational report, I won't add anything to what Chris has already said about the solar project. He pretty well covered it. I do have 3 brief items that I'll touch on. One is on the water system. When we had the workshop last week and the tour of Plant 2, staff had mentioned to the commission that we were approaching frazzle ice conditions, and we're getting ready for frazzle ice mode. Well, interestingly enough, Friday came along after that workshop, and we were right there. Water temperature was frazzle ice temperature, but for whatever reason, the X factor wasn't there, and we didn't hit frazzle ice. So we basically dodged a bullet on that one. The good news is, and consider very good news is the new air compressor at plant 1. Basically, we got an okay from the company that's in charge of that installation to go ahead and test the compressor under real-time conditions. And it came through with flying colors. So we're close to having that project done, and we'll have a air compressor at plant 1 large enough that we won't need the diesel-fired compressor, although we may still bring it on site as a standby, but it's good news. We won't have to burn diesel. So that worked out real well for us, that test. On the electric side, one thing I wanted to mention was that I went through and I've been finishing up sort of the data and statistics on our power consumption from last year and what Bonneville power supply and transmission cost relative to our load. And it just kind of highlighted to me the value, the continuing value of our access to Bonneville Tier 1 priced power. For calendar year 2022, our power supply cost averaged $35.35 a megawatt hour, or 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Transmission was another roughly $5 a megawatt hour. And that transmission includes both the capacity, the ancillary services, and et cetera. And then there's a little piece that's a growing piece. I call it regulatory costs, and it's primarily costs absorbed with regard to meeting the NERC electric reliability standards. For last year, that cost averaged about 33 cents a megawatt hour. So in total, the delivered cost of power to our system, not to our customers, but to our system, was about $40.42 a megawatt hour. And that's a deal. You know, put that in comparison, spot market to the day ahead market for today, we had to go out and buy power at mid-C. During peak hours, it was $87.50 a megawatt hour. That's just to buy it. Then you got to transport it to your system. If you were going to buy power off peak, which is kind of an interesting one, for today, that cost was $93.50 a megawatt hour. Off peak is actually higher than on peak. And I surmise part of that reason is, number one, the market's thin, and number two, California, you're selling south, you can get a higher price than keeping it local. So we're seeing a kind of a flip-flop in what we normally see, higher peak than off-peak prices. Another point of reference is we have recent experience. If you look at a solar project, Eastern Washington, I heard recently there was an offer of about $60 a megawatt hour to the bus bar for that solar. You then have to add firming and shaping to that, which is another $22. You then have to add transport, your transmission. So in our case, roughly $5. So significantly higher than we're paying currently for our tier 1 price power. And just another indication that consumers better be ready. They're going to see some high power prices in the future.
Mm.
And then the only other thing I've got, yes.
Brian, I just want to make a comment on that. And that's exactly what you'd expect to see, because your marginal generator is going to be your next generator that's brought online, which would be your solar wind farm about to sign up. So, you know, what you're looking at is the marginal price at mid-C is the marginal price for one of these renewables. And, you know, you're looking at $90 to $100 an hour. So it makes perfect sense.
Getting to Jamie's concern, a megawatt hour is 1,000 kilowatt hours. So we're throwing in acronyms around again. So.
Thank you.
The only other thing I'll mention, and it's just more of a question to the commission, is that we've got this operations report as a placeholder in the agenda. If there's any topics, operational topics you would like to see covered in the future, I'd be more than glad to address them during this time period.
So as a follow-up, Brian, to your report on energy supply and prices that we're dealing with, could you remind me where the Energy Authority study from the Tucci project was coming out at? We looked at last year.
Well, there's been two studies done. One was the earlier one I was involved in with NRU, and that was supported by TEA. But I see Chris has got his hand raised. He's been more involved in the more recent effort.
Yeah, that's the Ruby Ridge or Ruby Hills project. And I'm actually on a call every Thursday with the project manager, who's Gary Tucci, and Energy Northwest and City of Seattle, among others, that are looking at being potential off-takers. So rather than wait for any kind of a study, they're about to announce pricing, and it should be the first conference call in April. So Gary's got all of his final information. They've got all of the interconnect data from Bonneville. So they know exactly how much money they're going to have to spend now, and we'll have that. I will just say that the numbers they've been talking about are in line with mid-C pricing. So again, it's the marginal project, and so that's going to be your marginal market cost. So it's it's still going to be a lot of money to get it over here.
So and mid-C, apples to apples, meaning mid-C for a block or mid-C for unshaped?
It is going to come a mid-C for unshaped. So you're going to still have to have all of your shaping, your ancillary services, everything else added on top, and transportation.
Okay.
So all those things that I talked about.
Good to know. Thank you for that. Okay, well, let's move on from the operations report. Next is commissioner reports. Commissioner Arnett, would you like to go first?
Sure. I don't have a lot to report. I did attend WAPUDA's conferences in February. I'm on our communications committee for WAPUDA, and the Government Relations and Communications Committee together hosted the WAPUDA Day on the Hill. So we, it was the big barbecue and a chance to have FaceTime with your legislators. Also on the board of directors, there was some spirited discussion about how Whatcom County puts out public notice of us attending those meetings. The fear from WAPUDA being that people would see that as a public meeting. They have a 501c6, which means they're a membership based nonprofit, which is like a chamber of commerce. So it's not technically a public meeting. And I think there was some fear that the way we note public meetings would drive people to WAPUDA. So that was interesting. I also talked to John. We'll probably continue to still notice in the same way that we did. It was noted, and I talked about it at the board meeting, that it does say on the public notice that it's not a special meeting or a regular meeting. So keep that in mind. I met with Don Montfort from the Birch Bay Water and Sewer District over the weekend. He just wanted to meet to talk about water. He also noted something that Atul brought up earlier in the conversation, is that it appears to most people that we're not speaking about water. And I explained that we are very much interested in water and talking about that, but because adjudication is a judicial process, we're doing that in executive session. So I'm happy to see that we have, some updates to give to people, because they are watching. So it's good that we're daylighting some of that. And I also talked to Eric Hurst, and I think he's reached out to other commissioners individually to discuss water use efficiency in the water resource inventory area. He wants to put together a plan for water use efficiency. And that is essentially my report.
Commissioner, I just let you know that I have kept Birch Bay Water and Sewer District's legal counsel apprised of HB 1792 and in a high level, generally what we were doing in that regard.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Commissioner Grant? Thank you, Commissioner Arnott.
Yeah, also was down in Olympia for the Wapouta meetings and Day on the Hill, and I think met with every single representative from the 42nd and 40th LD, and I think they're really supportive of a lot of the different efforts that we're doing, and updated them on our various initiatives in broadband, water, and energy. I think, Senator Shoemake would be interested in having some further discussions about how she could support our efforts in water use efficiency, or the idea of some sort of a local water exchange. So I would just say that I'm interested in seeing where our phase 3 of the regional water supply plan takes us, and how we can really connect that to some real world projects and make sure we keep our state representatives in the loop to help with, budget needs. And so, I think there is a lot of interest in where that phase 3 of the plan goes. Yeah, I think that's it for me.
Great. So I guess I'll be the third commissioner to talk about water use efficiency. Chris, Steve, Eric is getting to us and a lot of people, and he's making really good points. And so I've asked in a conversation with Chris to really think about this. And in addition, this new money we're getting, is there also an opportunity in that to pay greater attention to water use efficiency? There's the study, Commissioner Grant, that you brought up that was done in collaboration between the Conservation District and the county on water use efficiency. That's kind of in limbo. There's some I's and T's to dot there, T's to cross and I's to dot, and some follow-on work there. There's various priorities that Eric himself has identified. And so it'd be really good to be able to point to, especially now when we have a little bit extra money coming in, that we're actually undertaking and answering some of the questions on water use efficiency that we have been asking for a long time. So I'll leave that there, unless Steve or Chris, you want to address that specifically?
I do
Looks
have a
like
question.
John has a.
I haven't heard any reports from Eric Curse that have really, and maybe they're there, that address the relinquishment issue of water use efficiency and the inherent disincentive that the 14-130 addresses. And it always has seemed to me that you can't get to water use efficiency unless you first address the relinquishment rules in the state water code in the Aquavella case. Does he have a direct solution for that other than legislative amendment, or?
So there's really, the focus is to identify, to request that we identify solutions for that, policy measures to resolve that issue, and not allow that to prohibit us from exploring the solutions that are out there, recognizing. So to hold up the may not be the best idea, to hold up the bus in terms of exploring what kinds of projects and what is the quantitative impact of water use efficiency, is part of the reason and part of the motivation for making the legislative fixes that we need to do. So
I hear that.
Yeah.
Having technical solutions might be an impetus to drive a change in the statute.
Mhm.
I don't see the ability to implement those solutions without a regulatory change. And it won't be done by ecology policy. It'll be an amendment to the statute that might take 2 or 3 sessions to pass. It'd be much more controversial and complicated amendment.
Great. So, next thing is, of course, where the WPUDA meetings. I have said to Chris and other people in our community, including at WPUDA, is that it's unfortunate that on energy subjects, WPUDA is often ending up in opposition to ideas for addressing transmission and energy supply. There are good reasons for that. As always in legislation, the devil is in the details. And so the way you address energy supply and transmission problems obviously has lots of points of connection to the public power community. There's issues of local control and other issues. So it's true that WPUDA does raise legitimate concerns to legislation, but it's unfortunate that so many efforts for addressing energy supply and transmission needs are getting stuck. And I think part of the solution for that is greater involvement from electeds and the public power community in between sessions to spend time with our policy and lawmakers to better understand the constraints and the realities of the public power community, so that when it's time to write the next set of bills, they have embedded them a greater degree of practicality as far as how to move our community forward with energy supply. So I also attended the suite of WPUDA meetings and met with many of our legislators, and I got to meet some new legislators at the legislative reception, and it was exciting to hear, have that opportunity and hear from other legislators as well, and other commissioners as well. The dialogue that I have in support of, I'm a mentor for Ken Hayes at Clallam PUD. Unfortunately, now we just learned at the last meeting that the third commissioner at Clallam PUD has resigned, Rick Pascal. So they're the commissioners there, by the way. I mean, I'm not sure if anybody in our group has suggestions, potential candidates for appointment to Clallam PUD, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that. It was sudden and unexpected. And lastly, Clallam PD has been quite actively discussing Snake River dams, and is likely going to be rescinding their prior resolution to support the non-removal or to oppose the removal, and to go into a neutral position. So we'll they'll be in a similar place to Whatcom PD regarding that subject. So anyway, that's my commission report.
I think we
So,
should move on to our second public comment then.
Yeah, then let's move on to the second public comment. Thank you, Chris. Anybody who on Zoom or in the room who would like to make a comment?
And that is, how does digital equity differ from the PUD's efforts at providing digital access?
Well, from a technical perspective, we're working on generating infrastructure to unserved and underserved areas. So there's going to be an intersection or an overlap between folks that are disadvantaged and don't have access to the internet and our efforts. So, you know, we're not directly addressing digital equity per se, but the areas that we're building infrastructure tend to be more digitally disadvantaged from an equity perspective. So, in a broad sense, we're working to rectify that. There will be a lot of areas that come out of this digital equity study where it's nothing to do with us, and it'll really highlight in Comcast area, in Zipley's area, and other quote fully served areas where there are some digital equity issues, and we'll be able to encourage them to work on that and help them pursue funding if it's appropriate. I don't know if that answers the question, and that's from a technical perspective. I would welcome any policy input from our commissioners on that.
That was a great answer, Chris. And you hinted at something that is really important and we didn't discuss when I raised digital equity. And thank you for doing that. I mean, certainly the digital equity problems in the community that are outside the scope of what the PUD is doing. And Rick, your question really helped recognize that point, that there are things that will quite likely could be outside of our scope. And our private sector ISPs certainly have expressed an interest in addressing digital equity issues. I think they are eligible for digital equity funding. Is that not right, Chris?
My understanding, and this is where Andrew can correct me, but I believe that they are eligible for receiving BEAD funding, or at least applying for it, whether or not they would be successful in the grants. Not 100% sure of that. I do recall seeing that in the original BEAD stuff. So, Andrew, do I have that more or less right?
I believe so. In addition to that, though, I think the state can put further board or guardrails on that and require a public partner entity to partner with the private for funding, or a nonprofit, or others, like we saw in the recent WSBO NOFO, Washington State Broadband Office Notice of Funding Opportunity, for the acronyms.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly
Thank you,
much
Andrew.
prefer greater public. I'd much rather prefer greater public involvement. But the good news, from my perspective about that, Chris and Andrew, is that if cities and counties don't get involved, well, it would be terrible to not let anybody benefit from the funding to serve the disadvantaged folks in Whatcom County. So I'm glad that that option is there.
Well, I will point out that the general fund governments are always able to dedicate part of their revenue stream towards digital equity if they so choose. They can simply do that. There's the general fund at the county. If they wanted to, they could go out and, award us direct grants and say, hey, we want you to go out and build infrastructure. Or they could do it to an ISP for that. I think there's gift to public funds issues, but be that as it may, general fund governments have the ability to get directly involved if they so choose.
Yeah, we have more constraints for sure. Yeah. Thank you, Chris. All right, so that's it for public comment. And of course, what we added to the agenda was a executive session. So those of us on Zoom will leave this meeting and then re-enter the executive session. Anything more before we go to the other side, commissioners? Okay, see you in executive session.
Hold on. Chris, how long do we expect the executive session to last?
I would estimate if we put it on the outside, it's going to be an hour, but I think it's going to be much less than that.
Let's say 30 minutes, and Ann and I will text each other in 30 minutes to do an update on the primary screen for this meeting.
And just as a reminder, there's no decision that's going to be requested coming out of this, and we will adjourn the
Okay, so we're just returning from executive session. It's 10:44. There were no decisions made and ready to close the meeting. Commissioner Grant, are you on?
Yes.
Any disagreement?
Nope.
Okay, well, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you. Everybody drive safe.
See you March 14th.